Good morning. Have you ever wondered why one business thrives and another one fails in the exact same market conditions? Or why one company who is the darling of their industry stalls, goes into a death spiral, and they can't seem to be revived? And I've wondered that for a long time, studied it, and had some very interesting experiences. So what I want to do for you today is to share a few things I've learned, a few things that I think might be subtle and not so noticeable. I believe your organization is perfectly designed to get exactly what it gets. And that design is an important word for us to look at. If we want to produce better business results and happier, more productive employees, there are a few key things we've got to get right. I believe that leaders are blind to a couple of the key factors that could make them far more successful. There is a design behind your performance, and I'd like to help you peel back those layers. So let's look at this particular cause and effect chain. Your results are driven by your culture, because your culture determines what gets attention and what does not. That is driven by design choices you may not be aware that you have made, and those are driven by mindsets you might not know you hold. So the two critical elements of blindness are there at the top. What are the mindsets you're bringing to the business, and what are the design choices you made that are then impacting your culture and then your results? I'd like to tell you a story about the first time that blinder was removed for me, and it was very fortunately for me early in my career. I'd like to take you back about 25 years. I worked for a fabulous company. The results were phenomenal. They had highly energized employees. They were highly engaged. And they hired to a particular profile. They hired for people who were entrepreneurial, energetic, fast-paced, and smart. That drove some excellent results for the business. But it also drove a shadow side to the culture. That shadow side was we had young people vying to build their careers. So a little bit too much competition would creep in, a little bit too much one-upsmanship rather than competition, rather than collaboration and coordination. This created some friction, and that friction ate away a little bit of the energy that could have gone into creating new products or in servicing our customers better. It then picked up a fever pitch, because what our executives understood is that we were in a consolidating industry, and we were not going to be able to survive on our own. We needed to roll up to sell. So they did a reorganization to prepare us for that. We went from departments to strategic business units, and they reshuffled the deck chairs. People got to sit in different seats. And within months, we were at half the profitability. Our employees were stressed, and we were starting to bleed talent. I was a very young professional in organizational design. They tapped me and a few other team members and said, fix it. I'm in my 20s. What do I know about life? So I did what I typically do. I read. And very, very fortunate for me and the team, we found this teeny little book. It is called Designing Organizations for High Performance. It was written by David Hanna of Procter & Gamble fame. And my favorite quote, it's become a mantra for me, is all organizations are perfectly designed to get the results they get. And it's from his coworker, Arthur Jones. So what it meant for us is if our results went from great to poor, we broke the design. So what did we do? We actually changed two elements. We changed structure and people. We forgot four. We had no idea these four existed and were important to realign. We forgot and missed decision-making. Who was going to be responsible for the decisions in this new structure? We missed information and communication. Who needs to be told what? How frequently? With what transparency? We missed realigning rewards and recognition. People were still paid and incented based on what had been in their old job, in their old seat. And then we didn't get processes realigned. Who owned them? Who had the rights to do something with it? Utter chaos reigned, and it took us 9 months to right the ship. Good news is, we saved the ship. It sold for a very handsome multiple. I didn't get any payback from any of that. But I get to talk to you today, so right, I get to tell the story. The sad thing is, I don't think this is an isolated story. If you look at the data on business failures, at 2 years in, we've already lost a third of them. By 5 years in, we've lost half. By 10 years, we've lost 2/3. And at 25 years plus, 75% are gone. Only 25% are left. If you look at family businesses, anybody know how many make it to the second generation? Less than a third, 30% make it. When we get to the third generation, you're down to 12%. And when you get to the fourth generation, 3% make it. Just 3. If that were human lives, that's an epidemic of disastrous proportions. And I believe we can do better. But clearly, we're not doing something right. I don't think those leaders sat by and said, I'm just going to let the company fail. They tried, and they tried mightily. But I'm not sure they were focused on the right things. We're America. We are where people come to pursue their entrepreneurial dreams. And we're smart. We can do better than that. So what do they need to do differently? Well, fitting with that 2020 vision, we need to see things a little differently. If we keep doing what we've always done, we'll get what we've always got. I'd like to have you see through 2 different lenses. I'm going to introduce them to you today, misalignments and mindsets. I call it M&M. I kind of stole that from Mars Candy Company. Mars Candy Company, by the way, is the 6th largest privately held business in the US. They have defied those odds I was just telling you about. So let's talk about misalignments, because I've already started there. Look for friction. Friction is a smoke signal of misalignments that are creeping up in your organization. They often take the form of chaos, confusion, and conflict. And I'm talking, those can be subtle. It can be absolutely dramatic, like my prior employer. Or it can be very, very subtle, small little pieces of friction. Pay attention to those, because those creep up. Before your lag results are affected, your sales, your customer satisfaction, your profitability, there are little signs, and the earlier you catch it, the better off you'll be. A whole lot easier to correct for a small misalignment than it is for a big one. They come from the misalignments between those 6 elements I just mentioned, but let's go back and cover them in a little more detail. Drip by drip. I want you to remember the acronym DRIP. It stands for the 6 elements. Decision making. Who holds the rights to make decisions? What process do you use? Are you using autocratic style or participatory? Rewards and recognition. What do people get paid to do? And it's not just pay, and it's not just bonuses. It's anything that incents or disincents a behavior, to include management attention. Information and communication. What gets told to whom? How quickly? Does the data come fast enough to support decisions? It's a system. There's a linkage between all of these. People. What kind of people are you hiring? To what profile? What seats do they go into? How do they interact with each other on a day in and day out basis? Processes. How lackadaisical? How locked down are they? Who owns them? Who controls them? Is there anyone above the law who doesn't have to follow them? And structure. That's the breadth of people I have reporting to me. It's hierarchical, it's matrixed, it's how the functions work together. Pay attention to all 6 of these. They form a system. They are existing in your organization now, whether you know it or not, and they are holding status quo. The sad thing is, we can design it once, and it can be working fine, but our world doesn't stay stagnant. It moves, and it moves quickly, and we've got to be prepared to move with it. But if we don't understand how to rearrange those 6, we'll find ourselves in a situation where the system is holding us to the old while we're trying to push to the new. Take the example of a manufacturing company. They've been lumbering along, doing well, they're comfortable, they're getting a nice little margin. But all of a sudden they start losing their key customers because a competitor comes into the market and they're agile and they're nimble and they're fast and they're innovative. So they have a panic strategy session. Anyone ever have a panicked strategy session? Been there, been called into a few. And they decide, all right, we're going to get innovative. we need to up how quickly and fast we respond. And so part of our strategy, we're gonna hire some young entrepreneurial engineers. They bring in a small little group of them. One female who has had some great success at her prior employment brings her new ideas to the table. Very excited to do so because they've told her in her employment interview, we need you, we need your new ideas. She presents these to senior management only to be told why it won't work. Ever had that happen to you before? Oh, we've tried that before? Or the derisive comments about her age and experience. She hangs her head in shame, she's embarrassed, she shuts up, and that spark of possibility just died. For her and for everyone else who was there to witness it. Have you ever heard the adage, culture eats strategy for breakfast? It just did. So let's add another dimension to that. Your culture is created by the dripping of that system, drip after drip. It's also shaped through a little dance. Copy, coach, and correct. A behavior that gets seen can get copied. And if no one coaches or corrects for that, it can get woven into your system in a way you didn't even realize. That can be working for you on the positive. You can take what is working and amplify it. It can also grab behaviors you don't want and amplify them. If you ignore the wrong things, they could bloom into culture for your organization. So watch for that. So you need to monitor one other element, not just those misalignments that create your culture, but your mindsets. What designs the design? It's the way you think. It's the way everybody in your organization thinks. The sad thing is you can get locked into those mindsets. So for example, that young female engineer, she decided the way to survive, keep your head down, don't rock the boat. That becomes a mantra for her. Whether she knows it or not, it's in the back of her head. And every time an opportunity comes up to push the envelope, she takes a step back. Often these mindsets get locked in. We don't even realize that happens. And often it's around a painful experience that we make a rule about to keep us safe, and then we operate from that without ever thinking. Take another example. A warm body is better than nobody. If you've ever seen a company who is having a hard time with accountability, they've got people who aren't performing. So let's take a construction company, and they're bringing in projects late and not on budget. And when you dig down to say, well, why? Well, they've got project managers who aren't doing their job well. No matter how many times they've worked on process or training, they're not doing their job well. And when you ask them, why aren't you holding their feet to the fire? But we won't be able to replace them. That fear gets woven into the way we do business. It shapes your culture, it shapes your business results. If I don't trust people, you're likely to see that evidence in the things I do inside my organization. Ever seen great big thick policy and procedure manuals? Or carrot and stick reward systems? Or lots of time clocks? Or the micromanagement I call snoopervising? Those are all signs I don't trust. And believe me, your people are looking for the rules to survive in your organization. And they see those evidences, and they create the rule behind it, and then act as if you stated that as a rule and wrote it into a policy and procedure manual. They're watching everything you do. A corollary to your design to get what you get is the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior the leader is willing to tolerate. What happens is what you ignore, you tolerate. What you tolerate becomes normal. What is normal gets copied and replicated. The question is what's getting copied in your culture what you want? Is it helping you? Is it building a stronger culture or a poorer one? Day in and day out. So what seems like little tiny behaviors, the little things that irritate you, could later become really big things because they're each little matches that get sparked that start that friction. So what seems like a little thing and it's a little rub right now can become a lack of respect later. And if I'm disrespected, there's no oxygen in the room. I'm going to fight for my respect. Well, when that happens, my attention is now not on our customers. It's not on our business results. It's on my safety. All my attention turns internal. Ever been in an organization where there's high politics Got to be careful what you say and who you say it to and garner all your support. Well, the intention's internal. It's not external on serving your customers. It's not external on creating new ideas and seeing changes in the market. And then when a context change becomes too big and blatant to ignore, you're too weak to respond well. And then you become one of those statistics. A leadership team who understands those design elements and understands the mindsets that create them has a major advantage in that bloody red ocean of competition, because they can address things before they get out of hand, and they can do so with intention and with wisdom. So a question for you: what little behaviors are you ignoring, and what friction is growing inside of your company? So let's recap. Your mindsets filter what you perceive, which then influences your decisions and your behaviors. The design then evolves and creates your culture, and your culture delivers the business results. I'd like to tell you a success story. One of the darlings of the Goering Center, they didn't give me permission to use their name, so I won't, even though it's a great story. Later you can ask me, I'll tell you who it is, because I like to brag about them. They came into a strategy session, and their big need really was around talent. They grow by acquisition at a rate most of my clients cannot keep up with. They buy these mom and pops, and then they've got to and they don't come with talent. Mom and pops, sadly, often don't. And so they have to raid their corporate office to put talent in place until that location is up to par. So we talked about how they could get to the bottom of this strategy for talent. And one of the things that was in their way is that they kind of hired for life. They hired people young, they developed them, and they would say, we support good people. Yeah, I know he didn't perform real well, but he's a good guy. He's a good guy. He's all right. And what they did is they came back 3 years later, and I looked at their results, and they were a different company. To my chagrin, it wasn't the use of strategy tools that helped them succeed. It was the fact that they challenged their mindsets. All of a sudden, they started doing things differently because they thought differently. They were looking for talent, people who could help them grow into the future. So they started evaluating talent 2 layers below the regionals. They started elevating that talent, pulling them forward. They started incentivizing the regionals who found talent, developed it, and promoted it. Different company 3 years later. They are rocking it, and for the very first time a couple years ago, they were able to they were able to acquire a company and not have to raid the corporate. They were able to pull from the farm team in the whole region. So it was beautiful. So the question: are you getting the business results you want? What mindsets drive your design? Do they match with your goals for the future? Are they driving a healthier culture or a weaker one? If you remember one thing I say today, I want you to remember these questions. You can go far if you can remember these, F-A-R. Ask, where is the friction in our organization? I don't care how minor it is. I've done many interviews. They'll say, oh, we're fine here. Everything's great. I get to that question, where's the friction? And I always get an answer. Always. It's amazing how that opens it up. Ask, what do we always do around here? Flip it over. What do we never do around here? That will start to give you a hint at the mindsets that are at play. And then ask your people, what does it appear that the rules are that management follows when making decisions? You personally can't answer this one, only your people can. And if you can find a brave new hire, they're not desensitized to that water, that culture that everyone is swimming in. Ask them. Listen for their insights and act on what you learn. Act to realign the design pieces that might be out of alignment, causing that friction, causing you not to produce the results you possibly can. If we are going to stem the epidemic of business failures, we have got to learn to see and do things differently to get a different result. And there's one last thought. You do not have to be a CEO to make all this happen. Remember that copy, coach, correct cycle? If you find the right behavior, if you find a way to get rid of some friction, encourage that in others. You can create a positive virus in the organization, get a few adopters to do it with you, it will pick up steam, and the culture will start shifting to the positive. It all happens in those little things, those little interactions between people every day. The more positive those are, the more positive your results are going to be. Thank you for your time.